Good morning, everybody. Morning. Okay, so how many people have heard of information builders before? Ooh, oh, there's a few. Great. Okay, so just very, very quickly, we've been established over 40 years. We have presence globally, serving just over 50,000 customers globally for data management, BI, and analytics-orientated solutions. And so our newest subsidiary, however, is here in Stockholm. So we're very proud of that and very happy to be presenting here to you today. In terms of innovation with data, it's a huge opportunity for us all, and to try and cover it in 18 minutes with 2 minutes for questions is extremely challenging. But of course, I think the opportunity, as well as driving phenomenal business outcomes, is an opportunity to combine the assets within what is predominantly an IT-orientated environment with the assets that exist across a whole business and external to the business in terms of customers, partners, suppliers, and so on, and actually bringing together an opportunity to be innovative from an outcome perspective that drives value for all. But at the same time as considering that, the reality is that often between business and IT, there are divergent priorities. And so, you know, we've got to keep the lights on, we've got to keep the engine running within our operations, and often that consumes significant resources within IT projects, day-to-day projects, at the same time as businesses really considering what new revenue opportunities there are that they would like to act on now. Not in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time. The opportunity's gone then because the competition have done it, because they're more agile, more nimble, more capable as a result of the way that they're structured. And so what I would encourage you all to do is really, if you're not already, is to connect to the business and think about accelerating ways in which you can innovate with data and drive value across your organization and out to the wider population, external to your organization, your customers, partners, suppliers, and etc. And this is where, from a data value chain, we can really see significant opportunity. Currently taking raw data and delivering some IT value-added opportunities. It's often a tools-based approach. You'll be familiar with those. This is about integrating any operational source, and it's about enriching that source in order that it can provide some form of business use. And as you move across the bottom from data assets to monetization, you're driving up the value opportunity that could extend across the organization and external to the organization. And so what we tend to see within many organizations is very strong at that area of consuming some data, orchestrating that data, developing some insight, and then the blockades start to appear. So I've developed some great insight. I know that this is going to be important to the business. So I'm going to share it with the business, and they might use it once, they might use it twice, but it doesn't form part of their operation. And often that's because they don't have an appropriate platform in place and processes in place to extend the reach of that insight, to extend it into value that can serve everybody within the employee base of the organization and potentially external to the organization. And it's not just about having a platform, it's about addressing from a business perspective what those use cases are, what those user scenario types are. How do they want to interact with that data? Do they want to interact with that in a data discovery format? Do they want to interact with that data in the form of a dashboard? The number of organizations I speak to who said, yes, you know what, about 5 years ago, we had Excel chaos. Excel spreadsheets spinning up left, right, and center. And it was almost like a sort of tribal form of knowledge management. What you knew, yeah, within your spreadsheet, you kept to yourself, and you didn't share it with the person opposite you. And now organizations are saying to us, yeah, I've got all the information I need. I've got it in 473 dashboards. It's a complete nightmare. I've now got dashboard chaos. And that's because these tools have been served up to provide dashboard views versus reporting. It used to be the case that everyone would have a request for a report, go into IT, report would IT would create the report, send it to the requester, and then guess what? Somebody in another department would want the same report the following month, so they'd put the request into IT, and IT would create the report, send it out to the requester. Number of organizations that we've seen going from thousands of reports. They're really proud. We've got this particular platform. We've got thousands of reports. And we've gone in and we've said, well, hang on a second. How about looking at how many of those reports are actually used on a regular basis to serve the key core challenges you've got within your business? It reduces massively, often tenfold. And so we incorporated elements of technology within our platform that enhances the capability to address report consolidation, address the dashboard chaos scenario. And often what we find is through the provision of info apps, the reality is we are operating within an app economy. It's very common for people, especially today, in fact, if you downloaded your app associated with this particular summit event, you did so with ease. Well, the concept of an info app from Information Builders does just that, but it serves the purpose of a specific individual or groups of individuals, depending on roles and profiles within that organization. At the same time, it also offers the opportunity to extend the reach of that data asset that you've got, that you've produced in the form of an info app, to a more customer-facing orientated approach. And so, for instance, Ford globally had a particular issue with the fact that their dealerships were taking in a car, and the car would have a particular issue, and let's say it was, one example was the exhaust is faulty, so we'll just replace the exhaust. And they went ahead and they replaced the exhaust. The reality is it was just a component on that exhaust system that needed repairing. It wasn't the whole exhaust. So they knew this. They had the data associated with this, but they couldn't share that data with 60,000 dealerships globally. They came to Information Builders. We produced an info app that gave the dealerships the information they needed in order to address the diagnostics and pick out the specific component that was required to be fixed, and as a result, repair just the component, not the whole end-to-end exhaust system. Now, not just exhaust, but all repairs associated with the warranty management system that we delivered for Ford, in year one saved them $30 million versus the previous year in terms of cost of repair. And that's been consistently the case. Well, year one was 30 million, the following years it was 15 to 20 million per annum. However, what also happened was culturally it changed the dynamics of how the dealerships were operating. The actual service engineers wanted to understand how they could compete more efficiently, more effectively with their peers in the dealership itself and other dealerships in the area. And so you created this competitive, performance-orientated culture associated with serving the right application, leveraging the data asset that has existed for many years, but providing that in the form of an application to the key people that needed it. So just one example. And so as we're moving up the value chain in terms of decision support-orientated applications and moving out to customer-facing orientated applications, there's huge value that can be achieved as a result. Another great example is in law enforcement analytics. And so, for instance, what police forces have done is taken predictive-orientated applications and put them into the hands of officers, often within cars, but also in the form of applications on devices. And as a result, they've been able to use these applications to enhance their ability to resource a particular issue that may occur in the future based on various conditions that are assets drawn from an set of internal data sources, but also external data sources such as weather information, etc. There may be certain events going on in a particular location. And as a result, they're able to predict crime, and therefore they're able to do what really we want our police forces to do, which is to prevent the crime from occurring. And in the most successful scenarios, we've seen crime reductions of 30%, which is great. We're all grateful for that. But we've also seen cost reductions for these forces of approximately 15% as a result of not having to, of being able to deploy the right resources at the right time and actually reduce overtime costs in the process. So at the same time as saying, okay, so we can go and get any operational source, it can be internal or external to the organization, we can bring it to the table, we can develop insights associated with all of those operational sources, and we can ensure its integrity, and we can provide that in an appropriate form to the audience that needs it. No matter what way in which they need to interact with it, we can serve that up. But still, in general, across the market globally, only 22% of employees have access to BI and analytics. Now, we're seeing this change fairly dramatically. And, we've got organizations that are thinking much more about putting applications in the hands of all employees, even truck drivers in terms of FedEx, a great example of route optimization technology and putting data into the hands of truck drivers. But it can't be a complicated application or a complicated report. It needs to be literally a very simple view of that data so they can take action. And so these different use cases and user scenarios have to be considered. And so that's one of the ways that we, in particular, differentiate ourselves. Yes, we can go and consume any source of data. We can orchestrate all of that data, but then we need to present it in a form that can be consumed by the masses. And so when we look at maximizing return from data and analytics, we have to consider all of the different personas down the left-hand side, what those requirements are for those personas, and ultimately the end results that are required. We often see this cutoff that occurs, and there are lots of vendors that are doing very well and they're fantastic at what they do, that perform analysis on data and give somebody a dashboard, and often it's executive management, and before it gets to executive management, it's analysts and data scientists who are able to develop the insight associated with that data, hugely valuable. But what about the non-technical employees? What about business partners, customers, citizens, the general public? There's one example with the US Bank, who they had a particular BI solution. They had 25 people within IT writing reports, producing an output for their business. And they wanted to reduce that cost, but drive more value. And so one of the applications that they considered was for their merchants. Across the US, they'll use the services of the US Bank, and they needed analytics in order to better serve those merchants. And so we created an application. That application currently has 20 million users. 20 million users who have, that's individual sign-ons, by the way, it's not concurrent. But they've serving a purpose through provisioning that data to a large audience to drive value that ultimately makes those customers, those merchants that trade with them every single day, more sticky, much less likely to go elsewhere. And so we start to talk about scaling, driving up value chain, data monetization, comes into the fore, and we're seeing more and more about the opportunity to sell data as a service or as an information product, and there's many organizations looking at doing that. Using data through operations, in terms of reducing costs, waste, and fraud, really we should be doing that today. Why aren't we doing that today if we're not already? It's a huge opportunity. And then delivering data from a customer experience perspective to drive loyalty, reduce churn, product placement, and so on. So this is an example of what we would see as a definition in terms of data monetization. But there's also many, many other requirements that come into play now. And we're seeing many organizations think about more sources of data, and particularly as it relates to IoT. We're seeing huge amounts of data come off sensors and then being stored within typically a Hadoop environment, and then lots of data scientists scratching their heads, working out how to structure that data and analyze that data and develop insight from that data that then they think they might like to share with the business, but they're not quite sure how. And at the same time as recognizing the fact that all of that data is coming from sensors and so on, at the same time as that, we're also seeing significant advancements within the sensors themselves. they're able to perform processes against data before releasing it from the sensor itself. They're able to store data, so actually only send out the data once it's been processed from the sensor across to the server in order for it to be then shared with others is a huge opportunity and provides a degree of complexity to a point, but also a huge opportunity to derive even more value as a result. And so when we look at devices, there's various predictions flying around. There's going to be a lot, and it's going to continue. We're involved in a really interesting project associated with driverless cars at the moment, and so that's full of sensors, as you might imagine, and full of artificial intelligence and so on. The reality is that one of the key values of the driverless car experience is the fact that if something goes wrong, or if something's going to go wrong, you want to be aware of it and you want to be able to get it fixed quickly and efficiently. And so we're working with an organization that not just senses the fact that there could be an issue in the future, it also goes out, contacts the dealership in the area, works out has it got the right part, and the service technician with the right skills to be able to repair it, and the car drives itself within that schedule to go and get repaired. So, lots of applications associated with big data and the Internet of Things, from transportation sensors. So a Boeing plane typically has 7,000 sensors on it. We're analyzing that data and presenting that back to suppliers and partners of the components associated with that particular plane, and also scheduling supply chain maintenance and support fixes along the way. A ton of IoT use cases, which I would be very happy to go through in much more detail. We're over in booth E21, I think. So happy to cover some of the customer case studies and opportunities that exist, not just around IoT, but also around the data challenges that we're seeing within many organizations. The fact that data is doubling in size for many organizations every 12 to 18 months, but that the major challenge with that is that 30% of it hasn't got the associated quality that it's needed to drive business value. So we've got to address that, and we have a solution that's specific to that particular area of capability. I'm desperately running out of time, but there's more people coming, so obviously the word's got out that it's a great presentation. Either that or they're waiting for the next one. So in terms of progressive data management, we're going from source to screen, in effect, with the numerous components that I'm sure that you're all familiar with in respect of how we connect, move, fix, relate, govern, as well as provide the appropriate level of intelligence to those individuals that need it, those teams, and other organizations that need it across the landscape. From a master data management perspective, we have got a huge opportunity to take the complexity out of master data management, which is typically depicted by this diagram, and moving into a mastering approach that is much more simplified, and as a result reduces time to value, typically from 6 to 9 months for mastering one domain, back to a set of 12 to 18 week blocks. Various opportunities around big data integration in terms of automating scoop and flume code and developing scenarios with our big data integrator products to support the ability to derive value from big data initiatives. Thank you very much indeed.